The headlines seem constantly to be with us in 2011 of civil disturbances in the Middle East and Africa. But what effect has there been on trade? In this part of HKTDC's Global Outlook, we invite Stephen Wong, Director for the Middle East and Africa. Stephen, to what extent do the civil disturbances in the Middle East actually affect Hong Kong relationships? And we're talking about places like Saudi Arabia, like Jordan, like Egypt.
For the three countries you mentioned, Jordan, Egypt and Saudi Arabia, the total export from Hong Kong last year was around $1 billion. Saudi Arabia, 600 million, by far the biggest, followed by Egypt, roughly about 300 million, and Jordan about 100 million. Now the immediate impact is not felt yet because when we look at the total trade with these three countries last year, it was registering roughly about 10 to 15% growth. Now we look at the overall situation, for example, the trade fair visitors to the Hong Kong trade show, we are seeing a slow decline in terms of buyers coming in. But overall, I think Egypt will do well. Particularly, they have already got strong support from IMF, from World Bank, and of course from both the US and the European government. Programs such as direct subsidy, investment in the stock market, to some SME funding programs have been introduced. And also, if you look at the investment possibilities, the Egyptian government has taken drastic steps to help foreigners to start business. Unlike in the past where it takes very long time to process the application, now you're seeing roughly about 2-3 weeks they can get their applications approved. So all these would bode well for the recovery of the situation at the moment.
It is a little bit surprising when you see the disturbances throughout the Middle East in places like Yemen, also of course in Libya and other countries. But I believe that the UAE is of course one of our best sort of points of reference and points of relationships in the Middle East. How's that doing, would you say?
In the Gulf countries, I think it's relatively stable. And the UAE as well as Qatar are free from any of these disturbances. The UAE in particular, if you look at the tourism traffic, is still registering something like 40 million tourists a year. 8 million are from Russia. And of course, if you look at the infrastructure projects, cities like Abu Dhabi, the various Emirates are still going full steam with all the projects. If you look at Hong Kong businesses, doing trade with the UAE is in fact increasing. If you look at, again, the trade fair visitors to our 33 trade shows from the month of January to March, when the disturbances have already erupted, we're still looking at double-digit growth from countries in the Gulf countries.
Stephen, these are the sort of figures that we talk about, but what are the real things that people in the Middle East really want from Hong Kong?
Well, there are a whole range of goods that they would require from Hong Kong, ranging from the basic consumer goods. Because bearing in mind that the UAE is one of the most important re-export hubs in the region, it's the gateway also to several countries in the African continent. At the moment, we're seeing also a number of specialized wholesale markets being set up in Dubai and also other Emirates. Across the board, you are seeing anything is similar to Hong Kong. You have a very diverse international population living in the Middle East, particularly Dubai, because 90% of the residents that lives in Dubai, for example, are from overseas. Only 10% are really the so-called Emiratis. So there is a tremendous market for Hong Kong goods to be shipped to that part of the world.
Of course, the Middle East really conjures up the idea of the souk, of these emporia that are filled with different goods. But what about high-tech goods that Hong Kong are becoming much more famous for? I mean, are these becoming an important area of trade with the Middle East, and particularly with the Emirates?
Well, of course, the Emirate is the leader, is the trendsetter of the whole region. So anything that's popular in the Emirate would immediately take off in other parts of the Emirate.
And of course, it's not just goods that we're looking at, but maybe in the service sector as well. I mean, people like architects, presumably engineers and people, that they can do business also in the Middle East from Hong Kong, using Hong Kong as a base?
Definitely. The Gulf countries, particularly Qatar and the UAE. Qatar because they have got the rights to hold the 2022 World Cup, and they have already tabled a series of projects which they want international companies to bid on. There is a total $60 billion worth of infrastructure projects. They need to build 70,000 hotel rooms. They need to build stadiums, a lot of new infrastructure like metro and so on and so forth. Now these are the possibilities for Hong Kong.
And swinging it round, Stephen, really looking at it from the other way around, to what extent are Middle Eastern companies, and particularly those from Africa as well, interested in using Hong Kong as a base for They're now developing Chinese consumer market. Are they finding that this is the place to come, or is it really quite competitive?
Definitely, there are a lot of opportunities for Middle East companies looking at Hong Kong. For example, in the food sector, the tea sector. You might not be aware, Kenya, for example, is the biggest tea exporter in the world, outranking even China and India. The amount of tea, although it's black tea, not the green tea that we used to drink, they are having the biggest auction in Mombasa, Kenya. Every week, they have the biggest tea plantation, and also all the blending of the tea from countries like Uganda, Tanzania, are all done in Kenya. So a lot of companies are looking at the Hong Kong market. The Kenyans were at our tea fair 2 years ago, and the same goes for the fruit growers. Kenya probably is the only country on earth that is situated in the middle of the equator, so they have plantations both north and south of the equator. They can supply, for example, mangoes all year round, and the mango growers with whom we have met have expressed very strong interest in coming to Hong Kong. These are some of the examples for the food sector, but of course for other sectors like financial sectors, and also for people who are interested in looking at Hong Kong stock market, the sovereign funds are very still interested in the Hong Kong market. It goes to show that the entire region is full of opportunities, and Hong Kong companies are working very closely, in fact, with several of the companies in that particular region.